Hello and welcome to Lenric's Realm. I am Matt, and in this video I want to invite you to my old world tavern. What do you think is the most important thing while playing an RPG or a wargame? Is it maybe the rule set you're choosing? Possibly. Is it the miniatures? Maybe. Or is it the dice? Well, not if your game uses cards. No, I would argue it's actually your fellow player. I mean, there are means to play games alone. For example, Call of Cthulhu has single-player adventures, and some war games, like Fallout Wasteland Warfare, have solo modes. And they are great fun, and a great way to learn the rule set of the game. But as so many things in life, tabletop games are simply more interesting and more fun with other people. So let me back up my claim with a short story about my first contact with Warhammer Fantasy. It was the year 2001. The army book of the Dark Elves just released, and I wanted to collect my own army of edgy torture boys and girls. As a matter of fact, some models of that line still belong firmly on my favorites list, like the Executioners or the Corsair Champion. For me, this is still the best version of Dark Elves we ever got, at least in the Warhammer world. But there were some major problems with my newfound plan. First of all, the money. I was in my teens and still went to school at that point, and Warhammer back then was already not a very purse-friendly hobby. The bigger problem wasn't the money, however. It was simply the lack of people to play with. This led to a decline in interest in the hobby, but not in the world of Warhammer. And then Mythic Games announced that they were working on an MMO. The name: Warhammer Online: Age of Reckoning. This was everything I wanted at that time. I could be my own character in this great world. So I did. With a bunch of friends, I joined at launch day, although not on Destruction side, but on the side of Order. Instead of being the Witch Elf, I decided to become the direct opposite, the Witch Hunter. I guess I switched my edgy Dark Elf face for an edgy leather trenchcoat face. And while this was not a perfect game, I still had a blast. Although our PCs at that time couldn't really keep up with the epic battles we tried to fight. But at last my friends lost interest and moved to other games. And with them, so did I. So there is a pattern, as you can see. Sometimes finding a person to share your hobbies isn't easy, especially in your already established circle of friends. If you are in a similar situation, I would suggest try what I'm planning right now. Visit a local gaming club. Now, for my first visit, I wanted to bring a small gift to break the ice. And because I didn't want to bake a cake, I decided to donate a terrain piece. But after looking at my collection, I wasn't quite satisfied with my options. I wanted a tavern, a meeting place of old, just like a gaming club today. And then I remembered the Empire Tavern of Warhammer Online. So I went into the game and made some screenshots. Oh yes, you can still play the game. Although there are no official servers anymore, you can still join an unofficial server that is held alive by a small community. If you want to try it, you'll find the link down below. Now let's get to the build. I wanted to make the basic structures as simple as possible, so I used cardboard to get the shape of the tavern. Of course, I could have planned the building steps beforehand and make intricate blueprints. I, however, tend to work differently. The only real thing I measured out was the height of the different levels of the tavern. The rest, however, was more or less eyeballing it. This was in itself an interesting process, because the lack of real plans gave this step more of a sculpting approach. I added stuff, I cut other stuff away, and then added another piece. I also tend to jump between steps in projects like this, just to keep myself engaged. So instead of completely building the shape of the tavern, I began to add the bricks. Now this may be a little bit different to similar videos you have seen. Instead of going with insulation foam, which is a perfectly viable method, I opted for cork bricks. A while ago, I read an article in the Great 28 Mag that described this interesting method. I have linked the issue where you can find this article as well as the homepage of 28 Mag in the description below. If you haven't read any issue of 28 Mag yet, do yourself a favor and do so. I guarantee you, you will find a lot of inspiration. And it is also free. Now with the bricks in place, I added another cardboard structure for the chimney. Here I also added and removed pieces until I had an uneven look. Another piece I added was the tower, which is raising from the roof. I also covered the parts that were supposed to be brickwork with my cork bricks. A very time-consuming endeavor. After that, I started to rough up the still very even-looking bricks until they were more worn and, well, uneven. I added a few more cardboard structures, and with that, I could go to the next big step: adding the wood. For the wood, I opted to go mainly with balsa wood and coffee stir sticks. The latter have the perfect size for in-scale wood planks. I mainly followed the Tudor-style pattern from the in-game tavern. This is another time-consuming part of the build, so I tried to make life easier for me and remove some of the overhangs. This way I had easier access to some parts, which made this step go a lot faster. I also added a little stairway that I built out of a flat balsa wood sheet. For the final look of the bricks, I mixed a paste out of tile grout, water and PVA. The idea here is that this mixture fills the gaps and also add a bit more texture to the bricks, so that the cork doesn't look like cork anymore. I covered all the bricks with this paste and let it dry overnight. Next day, I had to add the final details to the building, like the door. For the shape of it, I used a simple plastic template I made with Tinkercad. This is a free browser-based CAD program that is very easy to use and lets you build simple shapes without much knowledge. In combination with a 3D printer, this can be a powerful tool to enhance your crafting experience. With the help of the printed template, I cut out the door frame and glued that to cardstock. For the door itself, I added coffee stir sticks and cut them to the right size. For the metal pieces, I used cardstock. I also used small chain links for the handle. And in the final step, I glued on some small toothpick pieces to look like bolts. With all that complete, I glued the door in its place. The windows I built in a more freeform style, without a template. These I also glued in place and went to the next step, adding the plaster. For the plaster I used simple air drying clay. In my previous project I noticed that this clay can dry with a lot of cracks. This was exactly the look I had in my mind for the Tudor walls. I added a bit of PVA to the cardboard and applied the clay directly on it. I mainly did that because I wanted a strong bond between the clay and the cardboard, but the aforementioned article also mentions that this can actually enhance the crackling in the clay. My wall, however, ended up in a look that wasn't as strong in the crackling as I wanted, but I still liked it. With the plaster done and dry, I had a few last touch-ups to do, mainly adding wood pieces to the tower. But after that, I was able to go to the next important step, which would also prove to be very time-consuming: the shingles. Now, the process of adding shingles is notorious for taking a lot of time. So I tried to make this process a bit faster. I cut a lot of strips out of cardboard, and every centimeter or so I made a small cut. This way I was able to bend little small sections upwards. With gluing them to the roof and overlapping them a bit with other strips, I got a decent shingle effect. I also reinforced the overhanging bit with stir sticks. Now it looks like there is a wood structure beneath the shingles. When everything was in place, the tavern was almost done. The only little detail I wanted to add was a tavern sign. I cut that out of a balsa wood sheet and attached it to a plastic chain piece from my bits box. This I glued to a short balsa wood beam. I also added a little raven I had left from my tent build that resembled the winged statue on the sign of the in-game building. With attaching the sign to its designated place, I went to painting. Now, painting was pretty straightforward. I used my airbrush to prime the whole tavern black. After that, I went in and dry brushed everything with the sandy off-white. Now for the colors, the wood was painted in my standard green and brown scheme. The plastered walls were painted with an off-white, while the brickwork was painted grey. I also painted the roof with an application of petrol and transparent turquoise ink. At the end, I gave those bricks a wash with a darker grey, which I let dry for a few hours. Now I could pick out a few more details, like the bird statue on the sign and the metal bits on the door. I also applied a general coat of matte varnish to the whole piece to give the tavern a uniform finish. And with that, I now have my little welcome present for the local gaming club. I really hope those guys are happy with it and it finds some use in one game or another. I am so happy I was able to finish this build in a reasonable time frame, because projects like this always tend to be more time consuming than planned. I feel very proud about the end product, but I can tell you, next time I'm gonna bake a cake. If you liked this video, please leave a like and subscribe. And don't forget to smash the bell. You also find me on Twitter and on Instagram. Here I post my daily hobby streak, where I also feature builds for my upcoming videos. And with that, I thank you for watching and farewell, fellow adventurer.